Hello everyone, Kyle here from Wide Awake PH. In today's episode, we'll be doing a long-term review of my personal Kinu M47 Classic. Now, it might be a stretch to call a nearly $400 grinder good value for money. Especially during these tough times, purchases like this can seem indulgent and superfluous. But hear me out. I do think expensive items like this can be good value, especially when they bring joy and happiness into our lives. Especially so if they're useful and used often. I acquired this grinder in the year 2018, and my upgrade path at that point was something like this. I started with the OG Hario Skirton and then upgraded to a Breville Smart Grinder Pro. And then at that point, I knew that I was super into coffee and that I'd be okay investing in a high-end hand grinder. So at that point in the market, there were only two options for me. It was either this, the Kinu M47 Classic, or the Comandante. So I did my homework, I read and watched multiple reviews, and understood the following. The Comandante is the more popular option. There's a huge community around the grinder, and therefore, it would have been easier for me to dial it in, to start brewing with it immediately because it would be easy to ask for grind size recommendations, which was a big thing back then when I was still learning about brewing coffee. The second point was that the Kinu, I feel, looked really ugly in the press photos. You know, if you look at the press photos, it kind of looks like a vintage stainless steel pepper mill, as opposed to the sleek, beautiful design of the Comandante. But after a lot of pondering, I decided that the Kinu M47 was the grinder for me. That this is my endgame hand grinder at that point. I bought it over the internet, sight unseen, and I was confident that I made the right decision. So here's why. I'm a fan of well-made mechanical objects. And to me, the Kinu echoed a lot of the build quality of the items that I like. So, for background, I like mechanical watches, I like film cameras, and as I was looking at product shots, reviews, videos of the Kinu M47 Classic, I could not help but notice how similar a lot of the design ethos and the engineering and build that went into this as compared to the mechanical watches and film cameras that I enjoy. There just seemed to be an emphasis on all the touch points of the grinder, such that as you use it, or as the user uses the grinder, you can't help but feel good using it. So let's jump right in and take a look at all the little details that went into the design of the Kinu. Remember the part where I said that the Kinu reminds me about film cameras and mechanical watches? Well, here are some features that I feel are so similar to that. For one, it's the really robust and heavy build of this grinder. When you deconstruct it, as you can see in these photos or this video, you'll see that most of the materials used to build this grinder is made of stainless steel. And in the hand, when you interact with it, it really does give a sense of solidity that the grinder will stand the test of time. The second feature is the knurling on both the counter screw and the grind adjustment wheel. It's just so well executed. The teeth on this is not so harsh, it's not so sharp, yet it is very tactile to the touch, so that releasing the adjustment wheel and using the grind size adjustment here, it's very easy and accurate to do. And it actually makes it fun to make a grind size adjustment, which is always a cool thing when you're coffee obsessive like I am. Even down to the legibility of the font on the adjustment knob or adjustment wheel is actually really cool. It's extremely legible in many lighting scenarios. There's minimal glare, if any, and the font itself is so clean and crisp that there's no second guessing where you are in terms of your grind size when you're using it. At that time, one feature really stood out to me, and I think it did stand out in the market too for hand grinders. And it's this. It's the magnetic catch cup that Kinu designed and engineered for the M47 Classic. It just really makes a satisfying clicking sound whenever you use it. And on top of that, it makes the workflow so much easier and frictionless, as we will discuss later. Another really clever design point is the handle. It might sound boring to you, but the way the handle is shaped is so well gauged to the height and proportion of the Kinu that it makes grinding it very easy to do, despite its hefty weight. Also, when it's stationary on the surface, it's actually not very easy to tip over. So really well done here by Kinu. The handle and the weight and height of the body is so well judged that in the 4 years of ownership, my brother and I, who also borrows my grinder by the way, have never actually dropped it. So this is a really big consideration, I think, that is not often talked about in any of the reviews that I've seen. The combination of all the design elements that Kinu has incorporated into this grinder dictates its workflow. And to me, this is where the Kinu really excels, because it's so easy to use. It's easy to make a grind size adjustment. It's easy to remember the grind size. It's easy to load the coffee beans into the grinder. It's easy to get to the coffee grounds once you've ground it. And relatively, it's also easy to grind, except for really dense, lightly roasted coffee. So here is the workflow for most other hand grinders in the market. You can see with these, you have to unscrew the catch cup in order to get to the adjustment wheel to adjust the grind size. This adds more steps and more friction to the process. In terms of grind quality, I find that the cups of coffee I get from the Kinu tend towards smoothness and sweetness. The focus of the grinder seems to be that it is emphasizing the base and the mids. So you get a lot of good texture, a lot of good body, pretty clear tasting notes. But when it comes to the higher level tart, acidic sort of notes, it tones them down and it smoothens it to have this really easygoing, relaxing sort of experience. So after 4 years of daily use, how does the Kinu hold up? Well, unsurprisingly, it's still rock solid and it's not showing any signs of slowing down. Turning or rotating the grinder is still a breeze, and it doesn't seem like any of the bearings have jammed or anything of the sort. And all I've been doing is regular disassembly, cleaning, and yeah, that's about it. I haven't done any maintenance where I have to re-oil a bearing or anything like that. So that's really cool. Also, the adjustment knob is very accurate and precise. I'm sure that when I've made an adjustment, I know it's going to stay there and it doesn't move around on me. The magnetic catch cup still works like a charm. It's still very, very solid and precise, and it makes the same sound as it did when I first got it 4 years ago. So in the 4 years of ownership, I've averaged around 60 grams of coffee with the Kinu. And if my math's right, that adds up to around 88 kilos of ground beans in total, which is a lot. And as you see here in the photos, the burrs are showing its age a little bit. They're dulling in certain parts. But the performance is still very good, very respectable. I still enjoy the cups of coffee that I'm brewing with this. And, when I Googled it, the conical burr set still has a lot of life to it. I think I still have around 200 to 250 kilos worth of life with this burr set. So that's a really long time. So I've been fanboying about this grinder for far too long. So now we should talk about its drawbacks. Well, for one, it's really heavy. It's so heavy. It's so heavy to the point that I sincerely believe you can use this thing as a weapon for self-defense in case of an emergency. So in terms of grinding effort, for the most part, it's rather easy to use to grind. But grinding filter coffees that are dense and lightly roasted can be very challenging. But what is really challenging is grinding for espresso. I've tried grinding around 16 to 20 grams at a time. It takes me around a minute to 90 seconds to do, but the effort that it takes is rather high. And this is coming from a person who does strength training regularly, and I'm an intermediate strength athlete, and I sincerely struggle gripping this thing and then like laboriously rotating the handle when I grind for espresso. So I think if you need to do espresso, you should get a machine. Other nitpicks? Well, I don't really like the material they used for both the knob, the handle knob, as well as the thumb stopper and the area around the thumb stopper. So they decided to use a rather high quality ABS plastic, but in my experience, it accumulates stains and oils rather quickly, and it tends to stay really shiny and slick, especially when you've owned it for this long. So I wish they used a sort of wood material instead, and I think it would have classed up the look as well. Another nitpick that I have is that it's not easy to clean the interior chamber of the grinder, and that's because for some reason, they don't have a way for the user to fully disassemble the grinder so that you can easily access the inside chamber. So after 4 years of use, there's now some coffee dust, coffee grime, coffee oil stuck around the chamber of the grinder, and there's nothing really that I can do to clean it. So if you have any suggestions on how to clean this, please type it in the comments below. So, would I recommend the Kinu M47 Classic? Well, the grinder is expensive. There's no other way around it. But if we take a look at the whole package, given how well made it is, how useful it is, and how much joy it has given me, well, I'd say that yes, I still recommend it, and I think it's great value for money. But on the practical side of things, when you look at the sticker price, it's around 18 to 20,000 pesos. Yes, it might sound expensive, but if you've used the grinder like I have, meaning I use it 2 to 3 times a day, and I've used it every day for the past 4 years, if you look at it on a cost per use basis or a cost per day basis, I average around 13 pesos per day at this point. And truly, I believe that that's pretty affordable given how much a priority coffee is in my life. So now on to the emotional side of the purchase. This grinder has been a fantastic companion to me in my coffee journey. With it, I explored the world of coffee. I bought coffee from local roasters, from foreign roasters, tried out different processes, varietals, you name it. And along my journey, or along my growth as a coffee enthusiast, as a coffee person, this has been with me. And there's a degree now of sentimentality attached to it. And I just find it cool to think that a physical object like this has really enabled me to explore and learn about parts of myself that I wouldn't have been able to without it. And so, that's the story of how a $400 grinder like this is good value for money. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.